Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us for today's Thursday with AARP Wisconsin. I am Amber Miller, your host, and also the Associate State Director of Community Outreach. So, before we get to our guests today, just as a friendly reminder, to visit the AARP Wisconsin website for additional information on voting, on COVID vaccines, volunteer opportunities, and also upcoming events. You can visit us at aarp.org/WI. Also, please remember the AARP Community Connections initiative that launched a few years back, but it gives you an opportunity to do a couple different things. One is you can find local volunteer opportunities within your neighborhood, or you could actually create a volunteer opportunity for your neighbors. So this could be like shoveling snow or picking up litter. So you can find that there. Also, you can find information on the AARP Friendly Voice Initiative. And this is free. You could be any age. You do not need to be an AARP member. But what you could do is put a request in for yourself or for your loved one to receive a phone call from one of our AARP trained volunteers. Because as we know, sometimes it's just nice to hear a friendly voice on the other end. So you can find information about both of these at aarpcommunityconnects.org, or you can call 1-888-281-0145. And if you're looking for a volunteer opportunity with AARP, we would love for you to join our family of volunteers. Right now, even though we are living more in a virtual world, there will be in-person opportunities, hopefully coming up this year, but also virtual opportunities. So if you would like more information or to apply to be a volunteer, you could go to aarp.org/I-want, and then the number 2, I want to volunteer. Otherwise, you can find similar information on the AARP Wisconsin website, which is below. So we always get excited, or I get excited, when we have anybody from our AARP Wisconsin advocacy team. So today, I'd love to welcome Lisa Lamkins. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Amber.
Always good to have you. You've been on the show many times, which we always love because that means there's something good cooking up in the advocacy world. So today you're going to talk a little bit more about kind of voting, getting prepared to vote, because if you didn't know, this year is an election year. So we know that the spring elections are almost here, and the spring primaries for local elections in some municipalities are coming up on Tuesday, February 15th. And why are the local elections so important?
Well, I'm sure, most folks have heard that saying, all politics are local. And really, local elections matter because local governments make a lot of decisions that affect our day-to-day lives. I mean, they decide things on, like public transit, school quality, police, public safety, libraries. They're really making decisions about how millions of local tax dollars are spent. And unfortunately, though, not a lot of people pay attention to local elections. For example, one of the most watched local elections this year is the special election for Milwaukee mayor. Now, in the last election in April of 2020, the turnout for that was only about 30%. So if only 30% of the people are making their voices heard, it's not very representative of the community. So we really are encouraging people to get out to vote more in local elections. The more people who vote, the greater diversity of interests are represented.
And if you're just tuning in, I am joined today by Lisa Lamkins with the AARP Wisconsin advocacy team. So if you have a question for Lisa, you can post it below if you're watching this on our facebook.com page or our YouTube page, and we'll be getting to questions shortly. So talking about elections, Lisa, so which local offices are elected?
Well, this really does vary by municipality. I mentioned mayor, so there are local mayors up for election, but it could include things like city council positions, school boards. It also includes local judges, which is something that not a lot of us think about. We elect Wisconsin Circuit Court judges, and they're important because they're the first to hear almost all the civil and criminal court cases in the state. So they actually end up deciding issues related to things like disability rights, civil rights, voting rights. Now, these are important to everyone in our communities. So it really is important to participate in the election of those judges and those other local elected officials.
And Lisa, if our viewers are watching this right now, what would be a good way for them to learn about the local candidates? Where could they find that information?
Yeah, I think it is really important to be an informed voter about local elections. And sometimes you might think it's a little harder to do. We see all of the television commercials for, the big statewide races. But it's not too difficult to find out about local candidates as well. And one of the first things I think people have to do is decide what issues are important to you. How do those candidates and their values align with your values and the things that are important to you? And what kinds of qualities do you want in a leader of your local community? And from there, it's not really difficult to do a little bit of research, and it doesn't even have to take a lot of time. Even local candidates these days have candidate websites. So you can visit those websites. Local papers are really good about putting interviews, typing up candidate interviews in the local paper. We're also seeing quite a bit of local forums, and many of them are virtual this time around. And one easy way is to visit, there's a website called vote411.org, and they've got nonpartisan information about candidates. And kind of all of this together gives you a really good source of information so that you can be an informed voter.
And Lisa, before I get to my next question, you mentioned back in 2020 about like 30% turnout. Do you think that had to do with the COVID epidemic, or do you think numbers have just kind of been low historically?
Numbers are low historically
Mhm.
in local elections. In the spring of those election years, we have these, they're nonpartisan local elections. And for the most part, turnout is never very high. I actually think 30% is probably, I would almost say even on the high side if you looked
Yeah.
across the whole state. Sometimes you're looking at 10, 15% of voters who turn out in those elections. And yet, those local elected officials are the ones who are deciding, are we getting a new street light at that busy intersection? Are we going to turn something into a roundabout? Are we going to add some more police? They're making critical decisions, the things that really impact our day-to-day lives. So we really are trying to encourage folks to get out and vote in those local elections.
And Lisa, speaking of the local elections, what are the important dates that are coming up?
So, and I think you mentioned this at the top of the show, Amber. The first important election is the spring primary, and that is next Tuesday, February 15th. And then the general election for these spring nonpartisan local races is Tuesday, April 5th. So, those are the kind of two dates that are happening right now. Now, we're just a few days away from the actual spring primary. So, it's getting kind of late. In fact, today's the last official day to request an absentee ballot by mail for that primary. You could do it, but you have to keep in mind your clerk has to get that in the mail to you. The mail has to deliver it. You have to fill it out, return it. Early voting, however, that's really where you can go in person and do your absentee voting in person. That started on February 1st and it goes through tomorrow, February 11th. And I've heard that Milwaukee even has a few places that are going to be open on Saturday. After that, you are going to have to go to your polling place on that local election day on Tuesday, February 15th.
So, Lisa, I have one question, then we're going to go to a viewer's question. So,
Yeah.
I know you are all about simplicity and like really trying to empower people to make sure that that their voice and vote is being counted. So, you've got 5 steps for making sure your ballot counts in the 2022 election. So, what are the ways that people can get organized and make a plan now that we have the dates that you were talking about?
Yeah, well, and I think, one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this so early, of course, one is the importance of local elections, but we have other elections throughout 2022 as well. We will have our partisan primary in August and then the general election with lots of statewide elections coming up in November. So now is a great time to sort of do these 5 steps to make sure that your ballot counts. The very first thing is to check your voter registration. And you can, and that's myvote.wi.gov. And you can actually do all of these things at that MyVote Wisconsin page. So, first, check your voter registration there. Make sure that all of your information is correct. If you haven't registered, you can register on that site. Or you can re-register if you've moved. Maybe you didn't even think about it, but you moved from your house into an apartment. So you would need to re-register. So you can do that. So first, check your voter registration. The next thing you can do is find out what's on your ballot. Your ballot and your local election information are really based on where you live. So there's a section on the My Vote page that's called What's on My Ballot. All you do is enter your address and you can see a sample ballot of some of the elections in your area. The next step is to request an absentee ballot if you plan to vote by mail. So as I said, the deadline's pretty tight for the spring primary, but you can go in now and request absentee ballots for the rest of the elections this year. If you do that, you won't have to do it prior to every election. They will automatically get sent to you through the remainder of 2022. It's important to note if you did this last year, and a lot of people did it, you will need to do it again. So that request is only for the calendar year. So if people are interested in voting absentee, I encourage you to do that and just say you want the absentee ballots for the rest of the year. I will make one little note about that. It's really around drop boxes, ballot drop boxes for absentee ballots. There was a big push, last time around. There were lots of communities put up extra additional ballot drop boxes. They were safe and secure, and communities, utilized them effectively. And the local clerks who managed these elections did an amazing job. There are some court cases now around whether local ballot drop boxes are going to be allowed. But it's important that people know the courts have determined so far that for the February 15th election for this spring primary, those local ballot drop boxes that might be around your community are valid, they're allowed, they can be in place. It still remains to be seen what will happen with those going forward. So I digressed a little bit from my tidbits, but absentee ballot stuff we'll definitely want to talk more about. The fourth thing you can do is find out when you can vote early. Again, remember that's going in person and casting your absentee ballot, and that the hours and the dates really vary by municipality. And finally, there still are a lot of people who plan to vote in person at the polls on election day. So you'll want to find your polling place and find out where you need to go when the time comes. And that's it. Those are my 5 steps.
I love the 5 steps. They're very easy, and it's also just remembering these dates. So we have a comment from Jim that we're going to bring up. Okay, so Jim Flaherty is asking, what can ordinary citizens do in their community to help boost voter turnout in the upcoming Wisconsin election?
That's a great question, Jim. And, I'm really going to sort of go back to one of our volunteers who has great advice, and she's always making a pitch for getting people to sign up to get absentee ballots. And the best thing to do then is, if you have done that, is to tell others and to make a pledge. She wants folks to pledge to help 10 other people get their absentee ballots. So you can pick your own number. But if you have a plan for voting, you can share this information with other people and make sure that they have a plan, and make sure that people have a way to get to the polls on election day. That can often be an issue for older folks. You can offer to be a witness, because every absentee The outside of every absentee ballot envelope needs to be signed by a witness. So if you know people who are living alone, maybe offer to be their witness on their absentee ballot. The more people we can get engaged, the better outcomes we're going to have.
And I could speak for myself. I'm in Milwaukee. I did my absentee ballot and it came extremely fast, but also I did request it a couple weeks ago. And it just, as you stated, like we're getting kind of to the crunch time where the only option would be to go in person. Lisa, do people need a picture ID to vote?
Yes. In Wisconsin, we do have a photo ID requirement. Many people, and probably the best thing to do is to upload your photo ID into that My Vote Wisconsin system. And once you have it there, it's good. You don't have to upload a new one every year. You will need that in the system in order to request an absentee ballot, unless you are indefinitely confined. And that really means you can't get out and get around places, and you're not mobile and not getting around out and about easily. For many people, you will need to have a photo ID on file, but do it once and then you're good. It does not have to be updated every year.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. And I know that I mentioned I live in Milwaukee. Obviously, this is kind of a big time for us. So, of course, we're all watching the Milwaukee mayoral race that's coming up, pretty closely. Can you share some of the issues that AARP would like to see the candidates address in Milwaukee?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I'm excited to talk about this because this is a great way that Amber and I are getting to work together
Mhm.
on some outreach in Milwaukee. And there are really, I think, three top issues that have been identified as priorities for AARP in this election for the Milwaukee mayor. And those are transportation, outdoor spaces, and housing. And I'll talk a little bit about those, but I want to also put them in the framework that these issues are important in all local communities. And I think even though we're elevating them in this election for Milwaukee mayor, no matter where you're watching from, all of these issues are important for older people in their communities. And these are things you can bring to the attention of any local candidates. So let me talk a little bit first about transportation. It's also walkability,
Yeah.
right? Sort of understanding that driving doesn't have to be the only way to get around. Having things like dedicated bicycle lanes, having a wide range of public transportation options. Those things are good for people who don't have cars at all, or for older people who can no longer drive. We also need to make sure that pedestrians have safe sidewalks, crossable streets, making sure snow and ice are cleared from the sidewalks and that they're not crumbling, making sure there's enough time to get across the crosswalk at those intersections. I know for
Yeah.
myself, sometimes I get stressed and I'm, start
Yeah.
jogging because the clicker is not enough time. And what would happen if I was an older person with a
Yeah.
cane and trying to
Right.
get across there?
Mhm.
So, that is an issue. And then I think the kind of last component of that issue is the humongous increase in reckless driving. I
Yeah.
know it's an issue in Milwaukee, but I
Mhm.
know it's an issue everywhere,
Mhm.
that we seem to be having an epidemic of reckless driving. So that idea of transportation and transportation alternatives is a key issue for AARP. And it's the kind of thing you can ask local candidates about, like, what actions are you going to take to make this community a safer place for pedestrians? So I think that's something that any community uh, can learn from.
Correct. And I know that we talk about, when you were talking about like walkability and transportation, I'm in my early 40s. I can still say that. I didn't think about those things until I started with AARP. You don't think about eventually if for my personal choice or maybe it's for medical reasons I choose not to drive, what opportunities and how can I get around? Is it, a bus? Is it Uber? Am I going to walk? And if I am, do I have what is the walkability? About 2 years ago, I did a walk audit with the Village of Shorewood, which is here in Milwaukee County. And in my team, we had a woman, I would say probably closer to 80, who had a walker. The sidewalks were like not plowed at all. She could barely push the walker over the ice, and she did cross the street, which barely the walker could even fit through the small path that was given to her. And she barely made it across the street. And it was just eye-opening of like, what could we do in our own local community to make a big impact? And I love being ensuring that our voice is heard, especially when it comes to elections.
And I think, Amber, you point out something really important, that this really is something that benefits people of all ages. I will say I'm not in my early 40s anymore, but
Yeah.
when I was, there was a time in my life when I was a very active jogger. And, you need safe, even sidewalks, crossable streets as a jogger. I also have 2 kids. So I've spent many days trying to drag a stroller, into buildings, across intersections, trying to get them up and down over a curb. So these are the kinds of things that are good for not just older people or people with disabilities, but they're good for families. They're good for kids who are learning how to ride bikes and maybe want a curb cut. They're just common sense ways to make our communities safer and more accessible for everybody who lives in them. And I think that's really key.
And we want to make sure too that that whatever community we live in, that if they're going to be redoing roads or sidewalks or public spaces, that they're listening to us as residents to see what design would make sense for us. And all of this information, not only the voter education piece, but the AARP Livable Community Initiative, we'll make sure we put that in the notes if it's something that you would like to read about. And if you joined us this week, the city of Wauwatosa, which is in Milwaukee County, became our 7th livable community. So they're going to start looking at these things that Lisa is talking about. Before we get to our last question, Lisa, there is Reed just made a comment regarding like the absentee ballot. Got to do this ASAP today. My ballot's unfilled, doing it as soon as the program ends. Well, Reed is one of our valuable volunteers, and it's okay if you bow out early from this show so you can get going on that ballot.
Thank you, Reed.
Thanks, Reed. And then we also have a comment from Arlene that we'll be pulling up. So Arlene said, thank you for providing this valuable information. And I agree. Sometimes we just, and that AARP is all about, voter education. And Lisa, you could probably do this show every single day, have the same information, but maybe a different person is listening to it. So that's why we're so big on this voter education piece.
Well, and the one thing, you're right. And we want to get this information out. And if, viewers have suggestions on ways we could help get this information out, please put them in the comments. Even if you're, watching things later, shoot us an email. We would love to be able to share information. AARP will have tons of things on, how to fill out your absentee ballot. What are the important issues? What are questions you can ask candidates? We'll have these not only for the local elections that we're focused on right now, but we'll have them for our state elections. And then we have, elections for congressional offices as well. So we're sort of building through the year, and we really want to try some new and different things and ways to reach people because, our ability to vote is so important and so critical to our democracy. And, it is something so valued. And we want to make sure that everybody gets the chance, that you've got the right information to make a vote that matters most to you. And that's really our goal with all of this.
And Lisa, final question. What other resources would you like to talk about to our viewers that maybe they can then pass it along to their family and friends?
So we have one easy peasy spot that people can look to check out information. It's the AARP Wisconsin Voter Guide. And it's at aarp.org/WI votes. and it will be continually updated throughout the year with new information, on any changes to the voting process, on issues that might be coming up. We just got it up, I think this week actually. So it is brand spanking new, but it will be evolving, and it's going to be a great place to check. It also has links to all these other sites that we talk about, the My Vote site or the Vote 411. So there will be links to other resources, and you can use that as just a springboard page to go and get whatever information you need. So I really encourage people to check it out.
Great. Lisa, as always, you bring us such great knowledge that I really hope our viewers, if you're watching this live or if you're watching this in replay, share this video on your Facebook or YouTube page or send people the YouTube link. The more information we could get out to people about the voter education piece, the better. It can only make our state stronger. So Lisa, thank you so much. You're welcome anytime. Please
Thank
know
you,
that.
Amber. It's
All
always
right,
a pleasure to be here. I appreciate it.
absolutely. And if you're interested in some upcoming AARP virtual events, there are a few that we'll be bringing up on the screen that might interest you. So Movies for Grownups screening this Friday, the movie Away We Go, Tuesday, February 15th. There's going to be a webinar hosted by Fox Valley Technical College here in Wisconsin about work for yourself at 50 plus. So if you are over the age of 50 and interested in maybe starting your own business, whether you're unemployed or underemployed, that would be a really great virtual event for you to attend. The 15th of February, family friendly, flexible housing options. And then lastly, February 18th at 7 p.m., Movies for Grownups, being John Malkovich. You can register at the below website, or call 1-877-926-8300. Please also remember that applications for small dollar big impact are going to be due February 15th, this upcoming Tuesday. So if you are a nonprofit or municipality that is interested in applying for a grant of up to $1,000 for things that can impact your community, please consider applying for this. You can find more information at aarp.org/WI, capitalized and then SDBI. So for next week's show, as we know, February is Black History Month, so we're really excited to have this special guest with us. It's Dr. Bert Davis. He is the president, CEO of America's Black Holocaust Museum, located here in Milwaukee, which will be having its grand opening in just about a week. So he's going to talk a little bit more about the museum and also what is Black history and why it's so meaningful. So you can come back here next Thursday at noon on our Facebook.com page or YouTube page to watch that live interview. So as always, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. A special thank you to Courtney Anclam, who is our guest producer, and of course, Lisa Lamkins. So we look forward to seeing you next Thursday. And until then, be safe.